As I ebbed with the ocean of life, as I wended the shores I know, as I walked where the ripples continually wash you, almanac, where they rustle up hoarse and sibilant, where the fierce old mother endlessly cries for her castaways. I, musing late in the autumn day, gazing off southward, held by this electric self out of the pride of which I utter poems, was seized by the spirit that trails in the lines underfoot, the rim, the sediment that stands for all the water and all the land of the globe. Fascinated, my eyes, reverting from the south, drooped to follow those slender windrows, chaff, straw, splinters of woods, weeds, and the sea gluten, scum, scales from the shiny rocks, leaves of salt lettuce left by the tide, miles walking, the sound of breaking waves the other side of me, almanac. There and then I thought the old thought of likeness. These you presented to me, you fish-shaped island, as I wended the shores. I know as I walked with that electric, self-seeking types, too. As I wend to the shore, I know not, as I list to the dirge the voices of men and women erect, as I inhale the impalpable breeze that set in upon me, as the ocean so mysteriously rolls toward me, closer and closer, I too but signify at the utmost a little washed up drift, a few sands and dead leaves to gather and merge myself as part of the sands and drift. O baffled, balked, bent to the very earth, oppressed with myself that I have dared to open my mouth, aware now that amid all the blab whose echoes recoil upon me, I have not once had the least idea of who or what I am. But that before all arrogant poems, the real me stands yet untouched, untold, altogether unreached, withdrawn far, mocking me with mock congratulatory signs and bows, with peals of distant ironical laughter at every word I have written, pointing in silence to these songs and then to the sand beneath. I perceive I have not really understood anything, not a single object, and that no man ever can. Nature here in sight of the sea, taking advantage of me to dart upon me and sting me because I dared to open my mouth to sing it all. 3. You oceans both, I close with you. We murmur alike, reproachfully, rolling sands and drift, knowing not why, these little shreds indeed standing for you, me, and all. You friable shore with trails of debris, you fish-shaped island, I take what is underfoot. What is yours is mine, my father. I, Pomanak, I have bubbled up, floated the measureless float, and been washed on your shores. I, too, am but a trail of drift and debris. I, too, leave little wrecks upon you, you fish-shaped island. I throw myself upon your breast, my father. I cling to you so that you cannot unloose me. I hold you so firm till you answer me something. Kiss me, my father. Touch me with your lips as I touch that I love. Breathe to me while I hold you close, the secret of murmuring of envy. 4. Ebb, ocean of life, the flow will return. Cease not your moaning, your fierce old mother, endlessly crying your castaways. Rustic up, so hoarse and angry against my feet as I touch you or you gather from you. I mean tenderly by you and all, I gather for myself and for this phantom looking down where we lead and following me and mine. me and mine, loose windrows, little corpses, froth, snowy white and bubbles. See, from my dead lips the ooze exuding at last. See the prismatic colors glistening and rolling. Tufts of straw, sands, fragments, buoyed hither from many moods, one contradicting another. From the storm, the long calm, the darkness, the swell, musing, pondering, a breath, a briny tear, a dab of liquid or soil. Up just as much out of fathomless workings, fermented and thrown, a limp blossom or two, torn, just as much over waves floating, drifted at random, just as much for us, that sobbing dirge of nature. Just as much whence we come, that bear of the cloud trumpets. We, capricious, brought hither we know not whence, spread out before you. You up there walking or sitting, whoever you are, we too lie in drifts at your feet. As I ebbed with the ocean of life, a poem by legendary poet Walt Whitman, American Treasure. Good evening, my name is Charles Carr and welcome to Philly Loves Poetry, a collaborative program between the Moonstone Arts Center of Philadelphia and Philly Cam. The focus of our program is to give our listeners and our viewers the experience of the rich culture of poetry in the city of Philadelphia, and to consider that there are over 50 organizations, excluding colleges and universities, that in some way or other promote the love of poetry in our fine city, either through poetry readings, special poetry events, which we will be talking about this evening, poetry workshops for poets emerging and those that are at all stages of their development, as well as publishing poems both online and in print. So in any given day in the city of Philadelphia, somewhere poetry is being read. So tonight, this is part 2 of our dedication to Whitman 200, Art and Democracy, which is a year-long festival honoring this amazing artist and poet, this American treasure, Walt Whitman. So tonight we have 2 extraordinary guests who are with us that are very much part of this celebration and very uniquely positioned to talk about some of the events that are happening in the city. First is to my right is Mary Toymey. Tuominen. Oh. Mary is a graduate of the Lecoq School of Movement Theater in Paris and the 2017 recipient of the Haas Emerging Artist Award. Mary's solo work has been performed at the Annenberg Center, St. Joan Betrayed in 2014, Bloomsburg Theater Ensemble, and the Kimmel Center Innovation Studio, Hello Sadness in 2015, among others. Mary's physical theater collaborations with Aaron Cromie, the Body of Lautrec, was supported by the Pew Center for the Arts and Heritage and the O'Neill National Puppetry Conference. Mary has also collaborated on commissions from the American Philosophical Society, a paper garden in 2011, and the Philadelphia Museum of Art between clinics in 2016. Mary's plays, Marcus, Emma, Interact, and A Peaceable Kingdom, Orbiter 3, premiered in 2017. As a performer, Mary has worked in many regional theaters, including our own Arden, Interact, Azuka, People's Light and Theater Company, Actors Theater of Louisville, and many productions with the Bearded Ladies Cabaret. Mary starred as a young Andy Warhol in Opera Philadelphia, Bearded Ladies premiere of Andy, a pop opera. She is an Interact Corps writer, a member of the Foundry, and accompanying a member of Applied Mechanics. I'd like to know more about that, an immersive theater ensemble. So welcome, Mary.
Thanks.
And next to her is Kloss. Claire is the manager of evening programs at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Mary oversees programs on Wednesday and Friday nights when the museum is open late. Mary's primary focus for the past 2.5 years has been the Final Fridays program, which invites Philadelphia artists and creatives into the building to lead detours of the collection, perform in the galleries, or facilitate hands-on art-making projects. Final Fridays provide a platform to amplify new voices and perspectives about the museum and its collection in a fun, offbeat, and provocative way. Claire has a BA in photography and art history from Guilford College in Greensboro, North Carolina. She earned her master's degree in arts administration from our own Drexel University in the spring of 2016. Claire thoroughly enjoys ideating, creating, and executing exciting programs for the visitors at PMA. So welcome to you both.
Thank you.
So this is a very exciting time in Philadelphia culturally, that we have used, Whitman as this great excuse to talk about all the arts and how Whitman really, his life and his work has intersected with so much. And many things very close to our heart because he's on the other side of the bridge in Camden. So I would first want to ask you to share with us, how you're involved in Whitman 200 and what your organizations are doing as part of this overall celebration.
Sure. So I'm working on a piece called Contradict This! With the Bearded Ladies Cabaret. And we're a queer performance art group that uses satire and gender politics and identity politics to explode what it means to be alive in this weird moment in time. And the collection of people that are part of this show, which is going to be performed from May 31st to June 2nd at the Cherry Street Pier, so right in front of the water. It will be outdoors. It's sliding scale tickets from $0 to $40. You pick your own price. So very accessible. And it's a collection of folks who are not all necessarily actors, who come from all different walks of life. There's like a 50-year age range of all the performers. I think the youngest is 16. And there's also like a community choir that plays Walt Whitman, and mostly focuses on this group of, I think it's 9 performers who some are writing original music and some are just writing original words, rapping. It's a huge range of folks, who are all very different, have different specialities, and who are quintessentially Philadelphian. And we're sort of examining Walt Whitman in this moment, in a time where we're American identity politics are becoming a huge part of our everyday discourse because of social media, because of where we are in this political moment, because of how divisive the country is, and because we're growing in ourselves and our understanding of what it means to be in solidarity with someone, what it means to be a minority, what it means to have trans identity, what it means to be genderqueer, and this growing understanding of what identity is. And Walt Whitman is uniquely positioned in that world because he, by our standards today, could be called maybe a gay man, maybe a bisexual man, maybe a queer person. But this is our modern terminology on someone who existed long ago. And for a lot of the people in this group of performers was the person who opened the door and who wrote poems that made them say, oh my God, I'm queer. Oh my God, I'm gay. Oh my God, I'm different. Oh my God, I'm an artist, or whatever it was, who opened that door for them and showed them who they were. And in researching this project, looking at in the way that we're examining a lot of our heroes now, where it's should we look at them in their historical context, or should we judge them by our modern standards? Because certainly Whitman wasn't out Whitman didn't talk about himself as a gay man, but how can we claim him? Whitman has complicated views on race and equality. In looking at some of his early writings, it seems pretty racist. And things that he edited out in later editions of his work. And so how does each individual within this ensemble grapple with that? And do you keep him as your hero? Do you cancel him? Which we see a lot on social media these days with like R. Kelly, Michael Jackson. This is a thing. Right. How do we allow our heroes to be flawed or not? And the individual's choice of like, how do I relate to my hero after he's broken my heart in some way? So we're going to make a performance around that is both a birthday party, a trial, and a funeral. And it'll be very goofy and silly and fun and lots of original music.
So the theme that you say, contradict this, why was that selected? What does that tell us about, what you're about to do?
Right. So it's like, do I contradict myself? Very well, I contradict myself. I contain multitudes. This idea that Whitman can be both gay and not gay, both coming toward you in a seductive manner and also saying, but I wasn't doing that. He's always like shifting in and out and saying like, I am myself, but also everyone, but also no one. His identity is so fluid, and he's like, yes, I can contain all these things. I don't have to choose. I don't have to define exactly who I am because I'm all things, right. Which is complicated if you're someone with like a very particular point of view, and you're like, well, I as a queer woman, and he's like, I'm that too, and you're like, but no, you're not. That's not your experience. But he is able artistically to slide around and be so many things at once. And so, how do we allow him to be all those contradictions? How do we allow him to be all those things at once? And maybe if we let Whitman to be all those things, maybe that is a roadmap to us, to ourselves, to allow us to be flawed and to allow ourselves to be complicated and our views to transform and ourselves to change. Is the idea. Okay. Yeah.
So Claire, how is the Philadelphia Art Museum interacting? We don't see, I guess people say, well, Whitman wasn't a painter or a sculptor.
Right.
But he was a great artist.
Yeah, this was actually just a wonderful platform for us to think about the work that we're doing in terms of programming, and think about poetry as another way into visual art. So we have quite a few things that were happening that were kind of all in the works as this was being developed too, Whitman at 200. We do have a visual art exhibition, Whitman, Alabama, that is on view through June 9th. And an artist, Jennifer Crandall, she was really thinking about Song for Myself and what it means to be an American and who is America, what is America. And she traveled to Alabama and interviewed 51 different people, all of whom read a verse from that poem, but also stayed with them in their homes, stayed with them just doing their everyday lives, going to work, doing their jobs. And it just paints this really beautiful picture of so many varied and different people, but all kind of coming together on this one poem too. So that is on view and is a really beautiful way of connecting visual art and Whitman's work together too. But then additionally, we were able to take poetry and think about what it would look like to have a month of poetry programs at the museum and work with such a strong poetry community in Philadelphia and a lot of different collaborators and bring their voices into the museum and examine works of art that are on view and bring those voices from the past and ideas from the past into the present too. So we were doing some smaller things, some tours of our collection, again, art making with illustrators and thinking about text and art. And we are culminating kind of this month and a half long group of programs with a performance by Patti Smith too, an icon in herself, in the Great Stair Hall on May 30th, where she will be reading some of her work, performing, and showing some video too. So. It's been a really wonderful opportunity to work with so many different people in kind of a new community in terms of poetry and invite them into our space and interpret these ideas, all stemming from Whitman's work.
Why was that poem? Do you why was that poem selected?
That is a great question, and I don't know. I think she was really focused on that work, and then it continued to just evolve. She was meeting with many people in Alabama, and then I think she was also simultaneously thinking about this poem, and then she asked them again if she could come back and if they would be willing to read part of this too. So it was kind of an evolution. She was meeting with a lot of them, and then she was like, this evolved into one thing together. You know, and I was in the gallery this morning, and it's about 2.5 hours long. It is an endeavor, but it is absolutely worth it. I watched about 3 different verses, and I was actually very emotional. You know, I was actually crying in the gallery this morning because it is so beautiful to see so many different people and their different lives and what it means, interconnectedness and democracy, and just thinking about all of these big themes too. Yeah.
So, you know, this festival is going to be going on, you know, almost a year, right? And a question that I have with all this, what is going to be the legacy afterwards of Whitman after the celebration? I mean, what are your hopes and your dreams in terms of not only more people buying copies of Leaves of Grass or, you know, going online looking at his poems, but, you know, the impact, especially given the existential moment right now. When we say art and democracy, I mean, that is a term that is fraught with a lot, given our political reality right now. What would be your hope of the legacy of this celebration?
Yeah. I hope we struggle with this guy more. I mean, we have to acknowledge that his DNA is in, I would say, most American poetry. Post Whitman, like, his DNA is in everything. He really succeeded in becoming multitudes. And outside of America, you know, in many different languages, like Lorca, and like Sherman Alexie writes a poem about Walt Whitman watching native boys playing basketball and being like the creepy uncle on the sidelines and watching the play. It's like, oh, their bodies, they're amazing. You know, everyone, and Ginsberg, he's gotten into all of us and our idea of America, I think. And that's complicated too, because he's a white man from the 19th century, and so this idea of like, I contain multitudes, and there's something beautiful about, oh, America's multitudinous. We contain all these different cultures, and yet we are one. And the e pluribus unum, like, but also he's a nationalist, and he believed in manifest destiny. And he was like, there goes the noble Indian into the sunset. Like, you know, this idea of like, goodbye, you somehow exited in a kind, not so violent way, which is super misleading. And so I hope that we both acknowledge how much of his DNA is in all of us and also wrestle with it, I would hope. And think about Camden, to be honest. Camden is a forgotten place. And for artists to think about Camden, I'm speaking very personally right now, but there's a great performer in Philadelphia. His name is Carlo Campbell. He's the artistic director of Theater in the X. And one day he came skateboarding up to me, and I said, oh, what were you doing? He's like, oh, I just skateboarded to Camden over the bridge. I said, why? And he said, well, we got to get used to Camden. We're all going there soon. Meaning like all of the artists will be gentrified out of Philadelphia. And I think that we should be thinking more about Camden. It's too forgotten. It is the home of the great gray poet, and we should think about it. We should think about that legacy, and we should wrestle with the idea that these two cities are right beside each other, and they have very different economic realities.
Very much so.
And I think we should think about those two multitudes existing in the same place, and that actually Whitman's over there. I think we should start thinking about that, and I would hope that would be a dialogue that happens around this in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just significant that so many different people and organizations are coming together for this celebration too, and are interpreting it in their own way. And so, you know, like Mary's saying, he is so complicated, and it's exciting to have such a wide variety of people interpreting this work too. And I think it's something we'll continue to talk about once this year, this celebration has wrapped up too. And I think that's very exciting for Philadelphia.
Yeah.
I guess what I really think about is the next generation, is younger people and a sense of their embrace and their sense of their involvement in this celebration. Do you have any sense of that from where you're perched?
It's funny because we do have a 16-year-old, as I say, Ella Perlman, who's a very brilliant 16-year-old human being, who is pretty ambivalent. I mean, not. I don't mean ambivalent, because ambivalent actually means like extreme feelings either way. Is pretty like nonplussed by Whitman, and because they're genderqueer and they grew up in a time. They grew up in a time where that was even a word that people they could have heard, and those of us who are older needed Whitman in a different way, coming out, and thinking of, and realizing one is gay, and it's interesting also because Whitman says, like, if of himself, says like the poet should be always on trial, and like should be, if either the poet is in the correct moment, is there for that moment in history right now. I mean, it's sort of the way that Barthes talks about the reader actually invents the poem, not the poet. It's incarnated in the reader, and it lives there. Poet's gone. And similarly, Whitman's like, I'm dead. Like, put me on trial. Like, if I'm not worth my salt, throw me away. And that's a trial that like each of us get to have individually. And I think it would be amazing if no one needed Whitman for that particular reason as intensely ever again. To be like, look, someone's gay. Here's some art that tells me that there's somebody. That it's less of a lonely encounter and more of a everyday encounter, the way that Ella has like a casual handshake with Whitman, as opposed to the way that people in maybe previous generations, certainly Ginsberg, had to hold him so close. That's my sense.
We have a teen ambassador group at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. So teens from different schools in Philadelphia, there's about 12 of them that meet every other week, and they think about programming and visitor experience and quite a few different things, and just are getting used to being in a museum setting too, what it's like to work there and think about that. And they designed a program around poetry, and many of them didn't know Whitman, honestly, but they spent time in the Whitman, Alabama exhibition, spent some time reading his work, and then they designed a program in a gallery where folks were able to come in and create their own poems. Pretty simple, but also inviting a new generation into an art form that I think is overlooked a lot of times as well. And they were very moved, after really taking some time to sit down with that exhibition and his work as well. So I think it's also, it's a platform, this celebration, and inviting younger generations in to talk about it and learn more about it too.
So focusing back on the poem that I read, I mean, there's so much, it's really loaded with so much. I guess it's how you look at it. On the one hand, it shows the vulnerability of the artist to say, here I've put myself out there. And for all artists, that's really a moment of truth, because artists are very great risk takers. And I don't care what you are, you're an actor or a poet or a writer, period, a musician, that, I've created this piece, and geez, where's it going to go? I mean, he's really kind of looking back at himself, and really, but the other question to me is, in looking at it, looking back on his questioning his sexuality in this, and a sense of what provoked that. What led to that? Or is that something that people, all people, are going to have to face? I mean, in terms of your sexuality and that probably torturous path that one, has to walk. when you're different or considered different than mainstream America or mainstream society. I mean, what's your response to that?
Yeah, I definitely, as someone who writes things and then later goes, oh God, it's horrible, feel for the narrator of this poem who's looking at the flotsam of on the sand and saying, and this is also what I make, is this, whatever this is. And then like wanting to kiss the earth like the father, like the erotic relationship with the father to like rekindle some sort of, because it is, the drive to create is also, pieces of art, I think, is often an erotic drive, and is definitely for Whitman an erotic drive. And to be like, the fire is out, what does that mean? Like, can't I get this going again? And did it mean anything? And it's really interesting because like the sweep of Whitman's poetry is so massive that it requires a certain amount of arrogance and bravado. And he's so humbled in this particular piece that you read. It's just like, maybe I don't understand anything. Maybe it's all nothing.
Right.
And it's really nice to hear him on that side of like, I don't know, man.
Yeah. Right.
It's like pleasurable to hear him. Like
I guess I read it as a song to not myself,
right.
or to some other self that's not a song. I mean, it's really, I read it that way, and I was really kind of dumbstruck by, where did this come from? I mean, was there a particular incident? Was there, I know that, initially his work was treated very harshly. He was really breaking off into a new area, and for the standard mode of what poetry was, he didn't fit. I read some of the, very short criticism, and it was scathing. And you say, wow, looking back, I just can't fathom after you read his work that you could have that feeling, but you were talking about an entirely different time.
He did also write reviews of his own work anonymously that were glowing.
Yeah.
So there was some positive criticism out there, albeit himself.
We all should try to do that.
Yeah, totally.
That's amazing. Yeah, so, in looking at this, in this celebration, and so going forward, with particular what you're involved with, what is the target? What is the hope in terms of the goal of it?
I think the goal is to, and I feel as though this is connected to what the PMA is doing, is to create a multitude. Yeah. And to do this thing that Barthes talks about, where the reader creates the poem. To say, okay, and in some ways to put him on trial, to be like, can he contain all these multitudes? What does it mean now? What does it mean to us now? And by us, I mean all like very different to us, and a multitude of us. And does the shoe still fit? And to give each person an opportunity to encounter Whitman in a personal, intimate way, which is what he demands anyway. He's like, come to me like a lover. And to decide whether you want to approach him that way. Because that's the beautiful thing about art, is that it's always on our terms. It's always on our imaginative terms. And I think Whitman really, for all his bravado, respects that, and for all his use of the first person. I think the goal would be to like really see all of these, for the Beards piece, the Bearded Ladies piece that we're doing, Contradict This, I think, is to see all of these contradictory people and to really like illuminate what that poet does to each of them, and to illuminate them, and to be like, this is who's alive now. Right now it's us. This guy's gone. Yeah. What can he illuminate in us? And like what tools can we use going forward, knowing that he's already in our DNA, knowing that like the America we were taught about in school was definitely influenced by this man's poetry. That music that we hear that's Americana is absolutely influenced by a Whitman-esque idea of America. That a Whitman-esque idea of what this place is has been part of us from our very young schooling. And so how can we wrestle with that through him? How do we go back to the source? I mean, does that connect a bit with the
Yeah, well, and I mean, Patti Smith specifically was incredibly inspired by Walt Whitman, and that's really this connection here. And playing at the PMA, which is iconic for her, and then being inspired by Whitman, I'm really excited to see how she integrates that into her set on that evening as well, too, through her readings and her performance. Yeah.
Well, so will that show be videoed, or is that going to be like broadcast?
At this time, we're not sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we would love for it to be live streamed, but stay tuned for details.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yes.
So, we look at Whitman, I'm fascinated, and I asked someone, I was thinking of like the 100th anniversary, 1819, the end of the First World War, right? And, how relevant and how prescient it was, Whitman then, we recently had a reading of Walt Whitman, War and Peace. It was organized by poet Leonard Gontarek for Poetry in Common. And for me, it was very powerful because that's when my father fought in the First World War, and that's when he came home. And that was so strong with him that he never spoke to me about his experience in the First World War. Never he would speak to me. But I did go to this celebration in France that celebrated his last battle. Not that he was killed, but he was gassed and taken off the field of battle.
Wow.
But that gave me an opportunity to share some of the poems that I wrote, as a result of this. And I'm not saying they were Whitman-esque, but very much inspired by, that experience of war. Because the Civil War was one thing, very bloody, and I mean, what he had to see, he was really seeing the product of it, when he was working in those hospitals and seeing what was happening to these men. But ditto, the First World War, it was a very bloody, terrible war. And the battle with my father, my last battle, 13,000 men lost their lives, And, that's very startling. I was wondering, well, at his 100th birthday, how were people placing and relying on Whitman in looking at this world that just walked through this, calamitous war? And I really don't have a feel for that. But I feel that we're in the same place in a way, in a certain political way. We're in the same bind. We're in the same place, especially now around the question of democracy. I mean, I think it was, very interesting that it's called Art and Democracy, but the democracy part right now, it seems to be up every day for grabs. And I don't, do you have any? I mean, I have a view of what he would have thought of, of what's happening with democracy. I think he would have been very disappointed. I mean, he actually had a poem called, To Democracy, and it was really a poem that was really built on love and, compassion and a togetherness. I mean, the greatness of America was this fabric that we have put together of people from all over, and now we're seeing just the opposite. Now we're just seeing just the opposite. And so I think in that case, Whitman does have a lot to say, would have a lot to say to us about what is happening, right now. And it's more troubling. It's not only happening here, but it's happening throughout the world. I mean, there's really a drift right now. So, the program is very much also poetry. And I always ask my guests if they could read a poem, whether it's your poem or, in this case, Whitman's poems. So I would ask if you could share one of your loved poems.
I will. I'm reading off of a phone, which I know is gauche, but I will read.
No, it's not gauche.
Okay.
I wish I could do that.
I'll read one from Leaves of Grass that's more on this subject of like trial, and then another one, and then the Calmus poem, a piece of the Calmus poems, which are pretty intimate. So we'll start with you felons on trial in courts. You felons on trial in courts, you convicts in prison cells, you sentenced assassins chained and handcuffed with iron. Who am I, too, that I am not on trial or in prison? Me, ruthless and devilish as any, that my wrists are not chained with iron or my ankles with iron. You prostitutes flaunting over trottoirs or obscene in your rooms, who am I that I should call you more obscene than myself? Oh, culpable. I acknowledge. I expose. Oh, admirers, praise not me. Compliment not me. You make me wince. I see what you do not. I know what you do not. Inside these breastbones, I lie smutched and choked. Beneath this face that appears so impassive, hell's tides continually run. Lusts and wickedness are acceptable to me. I walk with delinquents with passionate love. I feel I am of them. I belong to those convicts and prostitutes myself, and henceforth I will not deny them, for how can I deny myself? So that's you felons on trial in courts. And then, this is from Leaves of Grass, the Countless Poems. Whoever you are, holding me now in hand, without one thing all will be useless. I give you fair warning, before you attempt me further, I am not what you supposed, but far different. Who is he that would become my follower? Who would sign himself a candidate for my affections? Are you he? The way is suspicious, the result slow, uncertain, may be destructive. You would have to give up all else. I alone would expect to be your God, sole and exclusive. Your novitiate would even then be long and exhausting. The whole past theory of your life, all conformity to the lives around you would have to be abandoned. Therefore, release me now, before troubling yourself any further. Let go your hand from my shoulders, put me down, and depart on your way. Or else, only by stealth, in some wood, for trial, or back of a rock in the open air. For in any roofed room of a house I emerge not, nor in company, and in libraries I lie as one dumb, a gawk, or unborn, or dead, just possibly with you on a high hill, first watching lest any person for miles around approach unawares, or possibly with you sailing at sea, or on the beach of the sea, or some quiet island. Here to put your lips upon mine I permit you, with the comrade's long-dwelling kiss, or the new husband's kiss. For I am the new husband, and I am the comrade. Or if you will, thrusting me beneath your clothing, where I may feel the throbs of your heart or rest upon your hip. Carry me when you go forth over land or sea, for thus, merely touching you is enough, is best, and thus, touching you, I would silently sleep and be carried eternally. I'll stop there. Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, one of the questions I had is the title of The Bearded Ladies. Can you tell us how that came about?
Oof.
And
Yeah, that's a long time ago now.
When was that?
Geez. It might have been 2010 or 11.
Mm-hmm.
And we were asked to do a gig, myself and John Jarbo and a few of our friends, to do a gig doing French songs at a gala. And John Jarbo was going to play Edith Piaf and had a beard and was playing a lady.
Uh-huh.
And, it started out as just, we'll do some fun drag. And then we started applying drag. We had this Piaf show that did very well. And there was a show called Back in the Army that John had made about this legacy of queerness in the army and like the old Irving Berlin songs and how gay they are. Actually, sort of what we're talking about with Whitman, where he's like, "Oh, my fallen comrade, let me hug you because you're dying and it's okay now." That stuff. Like, I'm healing you somehow. So that there was that, and this was also right before Don't Ask, Don't Tell was finally repealed. And then we started dragging other more complicated subjects, the Civil War, we did a drag show about the Civil War, in which Whitman did appear and had a very, very, very long beard. It was played by Liz Filios, who's one of the best sopranos in Philadelphia. And she had this beard full of pages that went, and our costume designer, Rebecca Kanak, is a genius, and it like went all the way through the audience. And she sang, about the horrific nature of the Civil War. And I forget the specific title of the Whitman poem we used, but of course there's many about how horrific the Civil War was and continues. For us, that continues to ring true. Because in dragging the Civil War, we were like, the Civil War's not over. We continue to feel the effects. There continue to be several cultures built around your relationship to that event in history. Seems to be still playing out in American culture. And by dragging it, by putting Liz Filios in a very long beard, we were able to go at it in a way that was like fun and light, but talk about very dark things. And then, since I've made a bunch of very fun, weird shows, from Andy Warhol to Marlene Dietrich to like talking about very different and weird subjects, and now are back with Whitman. And the Civil War Cabaret was the third show we ever made, many years ago. So it's really interesting to come back to Whitman with everything that's happened to us and to the country since like Occupy, and a lot has happened. Right. And a lot has happened to our political consciousness. And so looking back again at the text that we used, where Whitman's like, the endless gestation of new states is you and me, which at the time I assumed was like, it's horrible, this endless gestation of new states. But in fact, that was not what he was saying. He was like, it's great, isn't it? Isn't it wonderful that we just keep eating up more land? Which I didn't catch years ago. And so now it's like, okay, how do we reconfront our old heroes? Coming back to this theme of flawed heroes, like how do we reconfront those contradictions where it's like, I fell in love with you, I fell in love with your poems, it meant something very special to me and it changed me. And now how do I confront that it's not as simple, that you're not as simple a hero as I would like you to be.
Right.
So it's in this bearded lady legacy, it is really interesting to be coming back to this particular beard, and these themes. As I say, this first cabaret we did about like comradely love, right, which is such a huge part of Whitman, and like the excuse you need to cuddle up to someone is that you're at war, and it's like, oh, it's cold out here in the trench, and to reevaluate all that now, a bit later, is pretty interesting. Because Whitman for us is sort of the OG bearded lady, the first, the longest and best beard.
So, past Whitman, do you have a platform, or is there a theater where your productions, or is it pretty much lots of different venues that you use for?
So this is not the first time we've been outside. We'll be outside at the Cherry Street Pier, but we've been outside quite a few times. We started doing shows in the Wilma lobby, the lobby of the Wilma Theater, not the current lobby, which is beautiful, the old lobby, which is crappy. And we just did shows in the lobby, and now the Beards have toured, all over, to Miami, to been at the Annenberg, been at the Kimmel, been all over the
PMA.
map. Oh, we went to we performed with the Seattle Symphony Orchestra to do Andia Opera. We've collaborated with the opera. It's just we've been all around now, and with the PMA.
Yep.
We've like done a cabaret about Monsanto. It's just we all kinds of crazy. So it's come from, we are not proud, we will perform in a pop-up beer garden amongst very drunk people. And in fact, people being drunk is pretty key to the cabaret working, because it's very key that people laugh. And it's very key that people take themselves not seriously. And that, John in particular, who's the artistic director and has starred in many of the shows, is particularly good at like provocation and picking someone, like searching out the audience member who needs to be provoked the most and sitting on their lap. Whether it's Mayor Kinney or whoever it is, he's very good at it, and so a certain like devil may care attitude is pretty important. So being outside serves us well, in fact, and I'm excited about it. I'm excited about taking this very serious material out there and seeing if we can make people laugh at it.
Yeah. So Claire, and going past Whitman and some of the programs, I mean, I've experienced some of the wonderful programs that the museum has made. Where are you headed now? I mean,
Well, again, I think that this is a platform to invite a new artistic medium into the museum and re-examine it and bring new voices in and bring new perspective and new life to our collection and to our building. We're undergoing a really large construction project right now, as you may know, which will be finished in September of 2020, the first phase of that. So we're going through a lot of transition right now, and our collection and our permanent collection and galleries is really kind of where we're focusing a lot of our energy, which is very exciting but also challenging too. But with the help of amazing collaborators like Mary and John, and we've been able to bring in these new voices and perspectives. And I think that's the way that our programming will continue to go too. It's really my goal to amplify those voices and voices of Philadelphia too, that maybe aren't represented in our collection, and invite them into that space for visitors to understand and for them to be on a platform too. That's the most exciting thing about my work.
what might you have on the drawing board now?
Oh, great question. Well, we have our Friday night live music series that happens. We have live music every Friday night in our Great Stair Hall. So that is under construction, but we're still doing it, still rocking out, and it's great. And then in the fall, we're looking to a lot of new exhibitions that will be opening. We have a really exciting designs. It's an exhibition called Designs for Different Futures, and it's all about thinking about the future. And I can barely even explain it because it's really hard to wrap my mind around. Right. But it's been very exciting programmatically to think about the future of Philadelphia, the future of our world, especially kind of in our political climate and where having so many conversations. So that's been really intense, but also really exciting. So I would look out for that in the fall, in October. Yeah.
One question I have to any arts organization, cultural organization really right now is how you reach out to, young people, let's say schools, really considering where, the plug has been pulled on a lot of that in our public education system, and it's really showing. And how can we do a better job? How can your institution, your program, how can we do a better job? And not only just speaking to students, but even in the community, the communities. And communities people don't think of. I mean, really, in North Philadelphia, parts of North Philadelphia, etc. Do you really feel is that happening, or is that kind of it's kind of an overreach right now?
That's definitely on our mind, and I think it takes an invitation, and just making sure that that's happening. And I know that the staff at the PMA, especially in the education department, are really aware of that. And I mean, it goes hand in hand with being under this large construction project that we are doing more work, outside of the building too, and inviting people in. So it is definitely something that we are considering because we've been around for a while, but we need to continue to invite new generations in to appreciate art and to learn about it and have the opportunity to do that too.
Yeah, making things free.
Yeah.
Making things free. And and figuring out what the sincere invitation is.
Yeah.
There are great people like the Women's Community Revitalization Project. They partner with artists or trying to now to partner with my company Applied Mechanics to do theater with the community in Point Breeze, to use art as a weapon in city hall meetings, to show up at city council and be like, no, we don't want the land trust to go to some developer. Here's a bunch of crazy art that will make you feel overwhelmed and embarrassed for voting otherwise. And I think the more we can use art as the people's weapon, and the more that we can show young people that art is good mischief, and speaks for and with them, I think the better we'll do, and the more it's free.
Well, thank you two of you for coming. I think it's been a fascinating conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
I was hoping for more poetry, but I think this is very. I think this is wonderful. The other thing is that our audience needs to understand is that Whitman at 200 Art and Democracy does have a website, and there's something literally happening every day that has been planned. I mean, at all stages, at all types of art, in all ages. So if people are interested in wanting to know more about that, you immediately can go to the site, and all these things are listed out. So I think that's really phenomenal. So once again, I thank you, and I really hope to have an opportunity to see your performance, and of course to come to the New Museum and be part of it with Patti Smith. So that's really great. The one thing I always want to reflect on as we depart on Philly Loves Poetry is that, and I'm really thinking of Moonstone Arts, which I represent, is we need support. None of these organizations really run on, just kindness, and we need financial support. And so I say to people, this show is just one part of what Moonstone really does. We publish books. We've become a very big publisher of books. But to do that, we put a lot of our own investment into making that happen. The genius behind that is Larry Robin, who's here, to make that happen. So I say to people, if you really want to get on board and help us, you can go to our website, moonstoneartcenter.org.com. I'm not quite sure right now. And you can see how you can become part of it, how you can make a donation perhaps, and to follow us. We do 85 readings in a year. I don't think there's any organization that does that much in actually bringing poetry of all types, to the public. So we definitely need your support, and these programs need your support, definitely. I know you probably have grants, but you need other support too. So let me be a cheerleader for bearded ladies as well. And once again, I thank you. It's great to be part of this celebration.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having us.
We can just talk more.
Say what?
We can just talk.